Welcome back. I think we've all been spoiled over the last several elections in India on getting quick results. That's because our electronic voting machines define simplicity compared to this very long drawn-out process in the United States where everybody seems to be changing their minds or getting it wrong. Pollsters getting it wrong almost state by state, bookies getting it wrong or perhaps changing their minds all too frequently. But if you were to look at what's been happening in the United States in terms of overall developments, here's what it is. Firstly, voting and leads. So projections which have been put up, which are very different from what was expected, where approximately 10% was the lead that pollsters had given the Democrats. That's changed completely. That's gone out the window. The second part is the entire business of vote counting. Remember, it's not just people who line up in the last several hours in the US and vote. There are mail-in ballots, there's early voting, and then the counting takes place at different times. So, for example, in the critical state of Pennsylvania, there are 2 million mail-in ballots, some reports suggest, which remain to be counted. So therefore, that's going to potentially change the equation in that particular state. And there are other states as well. Wisconsin, where again, it's not been counted mostly, the mail-in ballots. The process in Georgia is slow. Michigan is also complicated, to say the least. And then there is, and this is expected, political bluster. More from Trump, less from Biden. But Biden, perhaps in a sense, preempted Trump by going and saying that it's not for Donald Trump or for me to declare the results or to declare the elections. There's a process and it could take more time. And it, at this stage, will likely take more time, given the fact that it's going to take time to count all of the other votes. And therefore, what's Trump going to do next? Now, Amitoj was speaking to us a little while earlier. He seemed to indicate that Trump is going to speak soon and he's going to declare victory. We'll come to Amitoj in a moment, but the final point, which I guess everybody wants to know, is all right, so it's all confused, it all keeps changing, 219 Biden, 211 Trump, these are projections. When will we know the results, right? And actually nobody really knows right now. But Amitoj, to the point on Trump and political bluster, do you expect Trump to actually come out and say, look, we won, given the tweets that he's had in the last hour or so?
Well, absolutely. He's already said a big win on Twitter. He said it, and you can't expect anything else from him because he's been saying for the last few days, remember, you've not seen Biden going to these key states, this blue belt that we call the blue wall, and you've seen Trump going there, and when he's gone there, he said something very critical about particularly Pennsylvania, where he was very upset with the decision of the Supreme Court to go ahead and actually count the votes all the way to Friday. And I just want to read out one thing that we were talking about earlier, because this is so critical, Vishnu. Brett Kavanaugh, who was a part of the judgment that was made by the Supreme Court in the Wisconsin case that actually did go ahead and allow mail-in ballots that were postmarked on election day, or rather for election day, to be counted for the next 6 days. So today is Tuesday, all the way till Monday, they could be counted now because that's what the Supreme Court said. But Brett Kavanaugh in his ruling said the following thing, which basically mirrored exactly what Donald Trump is saying. He said, we want to avoid the chaos and suspicions of impropriety that can ensue if thousands of absentee ballots flow in after election day and potentially flip the results of an election. This is a Supreme Court judge mirroring Donald Trump's view.
Right. No, so that's absolutely critical. And I think the larger issue, therefore, Dorab, is given what we've seen in the US Supreme Court in the last couple of days and the fact that Trump has loaded up the Supreme Court with conservative lawyers, not to prejudge what they may or may not be deciding, that could be the ace that Trump actually pulls. You know, if this goes down to the wire, and I think it's fair to say it will go down to the wire.
Perhaps that's so, but the argument that Amitoj just mentioned, that Brett Kavanaugh made, is an argument that Ben Ginsburg, whose specialty is election law, nothing else, says there is a totally unacceptable argument. He, in fact, didn't say anything else about judgment, only about this statement by Kavanaugh. So the question will go to the court, and finally, a judge may not know enough about the law as the expert, but he's the guy who decides. but then they have to live with the consequences of the decision. For years, they have counted afterwards. For years. The ballots that have come in on time, some have allowed them to come in after time, so long as the post mark the right day. Now we change the rules. Finally the judges decide. That's what they're there for.
Okay, just one little piece of detail we can share in terms of that voting process. Now, some battleground states like North Carolina have been processing ballots for weeks. So, by now, I don't offhand remember the voting percentage at the moment. But election officials in North Carolina expect at least 97% of votes to be counted on Tuesday night, right? But in one of the most hotly contested states, Pennsylvania, the Trump campaign and Republican allies blocked counties from processing votes ahead of the election. So mail-in balloting this year doubled from 2016, and for many voters, the shift has been a revelation. So this being the case, Baj, this 219, 211, or, one goes up, one goes down, at this stage, this is just a guess, right? I mean, it could be dramatically different, and it will be likely.
No, it won't be dramatically different because on both sides, there are certain states which are given. California, New York, Washington, Oregon, New Jersey are all solid Democrat states. They're all large numbers. Those are not going to change. I think what we are left with is the ones that haven't been called as yet. So whether, you're like the New York Times saying 224, 213, but they haven't called Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. Fox has called Arizona. So on that, you would actually have Biden at 34, which is more than Clinton got last time.
Yeah.
And so when she's at 234, it needs 36 seats, which could come from just 2 states.
Yeah. So the other thing that's happened, Baj, in the last little while is we were talking about swing states, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of them, right? And about an hour ago when we were talking about this, we said those swing states by and large seem to be going towards the Republicans. That's no longer the case. Minnesota, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada. Nevada we don't know much about right now. We don't know either way which way it's going to happen. It's all too close to call at this stage. So that's a big change, in terms of the data.
Nevada is now a 7-point lead for Biden in a state which has maybe 1.25 million voters. So it's unlikely
I know.
Will lose this, but anything could happen.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So again, that takes him up again on this New York Times thing by another 6 seats to 240. So he's now 30 away from winning. And 30 comes from Pennsylvania and Wisconsin or any combination of states, really.
If you look at all of these...
You have to Pennsylvania, right? Not any combination. You have to Pennsylvania if you want 30. Will the other two give you 30?
No, you can have
because it depends on Georgia and North Carolina.
Georgia.
No, I'm not talking Georgia. I'm just saying.
But just one point about Pennsylvania, gentlemen. If you look at Pennsylvania right now, I take the points that Dorab and Baj mentioned about how postal votes are going to be counted. It'll take time. So 66% only votes in, but the lead of the Republicans is still huge.
It's not just postal votes, Vishnu.
Right.
The point we made was Philadelphia itself has hardly counted.
No, I know. So there's it's just 66% votes in. I take that point, but my only point is that in this 66% of votes which are in, the Republicans are massively, more than 10 percentage points ahead of the Democrats.
Vishnu,
so the change would have to be quite significant.
The reason for that, let's just understand the reason for that, is because Pennsylvania has not even started counting the people who voted before today and who have sent in their mails. They have only counted people who have come in to vote today so far. And they are now beginning to count people who voted before and who have mailed in their ballots, whose, by the way, mail-in ballots are still to come. So Pennsylvania is going to be way closer. It was a margin of what, 10,000. I think Michigan was a margin of 10,000 last time. Right now it's showing a margin of 200,000.
But Amitoj, tell me one thing. You spoke a little while back about Florida. 96% of the votes in. Things move fast. It is huge for these elections with 29 electors. You're saying that it's gone to the Republicans, or somebody called it. On what basis are they calling it? 4% still left to be counted, and the gap is just 3%. So could that not be absolutely even Stevens or change?
No, the answer to that is very simple. Florida is the first state in America that mastered the art of processing ballots. The reason they did that was because Florida as a state, the way it's geographically positioned, used to get a lot of military votes, and it also used to get international votes. And they have had a better system of calculating the votes. The other thing is Florida can go ahead and process their ballots to calculate them a lot sooner, way before Pennsylvania and Michigan.
No, so my only point is, how could anybody call that? That look, well, it's too close to call. It's just
because they have a sense of the number of absentee ballots that they sent out. So the electorate out there, the election office of Florida knows that they sent out X amount of ballots to receive back as mail-in ballots. And the calculation that has already been made by Associated Press and CNN is that the margin of victory that Donald Trump has is more than the absentee ballots that are still left to be counted.
Okay.
That's why.
All right. Ambassador Leela Ponnappa has been waiting. I just want to go across to her. Ambassador Ponnappa, this was seen to be an election. If we move away from the numbers in the states and the counting process, this was seen to be an election which was a referendum on how Trump handled COVID. Evidently, that's not the case.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Ambassador.
Yeah. Well, I think it would be a mistake to say that this was supposed to be something, because ultimately when you get an election, and I think even going back to 2016 when I was in the NDTV studios and Trump took Michigan and one other major state, Pennsylvania, I think, it was the shocker. It happened to be the night that demonetization was announced. So that story overtook the US election. But I think what we are seeing over here is really the fact that some things matter to an electorate and some things don't. And obviously COVID does matter. I think the economy certainly matters. And I think the divisiveness that has crept into US society has also shown up in terms of the racial divide and the ethnic divide. But this is not to underestimate the kind of support that Trump has from a certain very solid, perhaps you could call it even a lower middle class constituency of white men who are not overly educated, and that this is showing up now in the results. So it's very important not to call an election like this yet. We are very impatient because of our own systems by which counting takes place very fast once it starts. But even we defer our counting. So I think one really has to wait to see the picture unfold.
All right. Dorab, you want to come in at this stage just to look again at those swing states? Any new observations that you have? A couple of states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina. A little while back, the gap was larger. It appeared to be going towards the Republicans. Now these are all way too close to call, 1 or 2 points in some cases.
I think all these states, I think the three belts in the Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, as well as Arizona and Georgia, are just too close to call. But I'm sure within a day or so, we will know the result. But, the counting is, because of the overwhelming number of early votes and postal votes, I think the whole system has been put through a sort of shock, and suddenly is finding it difficult to cope, which would happen anyway. Happened here too. Suddenly they decided that last time out of the 136 million votes, probably 30 million came postal. This time 100 million have come early voting in postal. So obviously it's a strain on the system. They open each envelope. There's a Republican, a Democrat, and an independent sitting there who see it's okay. Then they open it and process it. So it takes time. I think, we have to, as somebody said, I think Amitoj said, Florida has mastered this system. So, we were always expecting Florida to come in at 8 in the morning. It was tight. And I think Florida is with Trump. There's no question about it. But things like Georgia, etc., were huge. Firstly, the electorate is expanded a lot. Between 2018 and 2020, the state has added 800,000 voters, 45% under the age of people of color and 40% under the age of 30. Well, those guys have voted. They changed the political complexion of Georgia. Whether it's reflected in the voting, we don't know.
Okay.
But that's the one state I'd certainly like to watch at the longer term.
All right, we're also joined by Puneet Ahluwalia. He's a candidate for Lieutenant Governor in Virginia. He is a Republican leader. Thanks very much for being with us. I must ask you this question. It's actually coming from one of our viewers. Why is the US system so complicated? Why can't they have electronic voting machines and VVPAT systems? That's what we have in India, where you get a paper trail of who you voted for. Isn't that very much something that you'd be also wondering about? Does it necessarily have to be so complicated when technology is available?
Well, I think that's the reason we need more H-1B visas to come in and help us solve that issue. So I would say, no, you see what it is democracy is not perfect. And there is ways of achieving this through technology. And by all means, you try to reach a perfection, but you can't. So I think it's a system that needs to come from the dark ages into the new technology age. And I think we have to, by screaming and dragging with both sides kind of looking that there's no fraud, there's no abuse, an equal amount of transparency that exists and should exist, because we want to make sure there's election integrity, which should not be compromised at any point. So that's the reason why there's a tussle that always goes on, and that's the reason why all these races come so close. And with this mail-in ballots, you can see most of the Democrats have done what they've done is they mail their ballots in, and we Republicans tend to go and vote in person, as President Trump has been beckoning all the people. So
therefore, would you be in trouble? Would you potentially be in trouble in say, Pennsylvania, where, 2 million odd mail-in ballots need to be counted?
Well, we'll be only in trouble when the Democrats will try to do cheating, which we are concerned about because there's been plenty of instances where there have been mail-in frauds. And yes, it's a matter of concern. And that's the reason why I think there was a reason why Vice President Biden came out and made that speech, because otherwise, usually there's no reason for him to come out and speak. Either he concedes or he says, I won. But in this speech, what he tried to do was to tell his people to get ready to be, ready for rioting and looting.
If you look at what he said it's not for Donald Trump or for me to call the elections, right? I think that's a sensible statement.
Well, he's trying to play chess. The Democrats are very well known for lip service with no substance. And what he's trying to do is that for some odd reason, if President Trump does come ahead, he's telling his people who are the Antifa, who are the ones outside White House in Democratic states, like where you see the voting going on in New York, in Beverly Hills, and in D.C., these are all blue states. These are all Democratic control. So they're going to create all the rioting and looting, which they're going to do anyway.
No, but I think each side is accusing the other of potentially, getting into violence. But as far as you are concerned,
I don't see white supremacists leading their charge in these Democratic control states.
No, but Mr. Ahluwalia, as far as you're concerned, have you won the election? Is it a done deal for you?
Well, no, not yet. We are. It's a close election. I think we are. It depends. It all matters. All votes are counted till the last vote is counted, and most importantly, the election integrity of all Americans who have voted properly and ethically should be counted and given the due regard. And then if we lose, we lose.
Right. And so which swing states...
And also if we win, we
win. Amitoj had a question. Yeah, go ahead, Amitoj.
Sorry, Mr. Ahluwalia, say you've not won, but why has Donald Trump declared victory by saying on Twitter, a big win?
Well, I've been touring the state. I'm sorry. I just drove in about 1 second ago and got on the phone. I've not seen his tweet, and
his
if my
tweet has
president
been restricted
feels
by Twitter, right? Amitoj, yes. His tweet has been restricted.
Absolutely. But no, you can see it. You can actually go ahead and see it. They're just putting a warning sign. Twitter has been doing this for a while with Donald Trump, and so has Facebook being forced to jump into the bandwagon. So I'm sorry, there is no question that he tweeted this. He has tweeted this. So my question to you is, why do you think he's tweeting this?
Well, the reason is for the last 1 hour I've been in the car because I went from my 10th district to the 5th district to the 7th district. My friend Nick Freitas, who's running for Congress, which is still not being called out, even though he's almost 20 points ahead. I have not seen the tweet, so I can't speak very intelligently on that.
But then
and
just
let
me tell you about the
room
tweet, and let me get a reaction. Because,
Yes.
you know, behind the tweet, it says, Twitter says some or all of the content shared in this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about how to participate in an election or another civic process. Be that as it may, the tweet is this: we are up big, but they are trying to steal the election. We will never let them do it. Votes cannot be cast after polls are closed. But there's already been a process in court through which mail-in ballots can be counted for up to 6 days after polls close. So
Vishnu,
why question the obvious?
After
Well,
that,
the thing is,
tweet saying, "I will be making a statement tonight, a big win, a big win."
Yeah, that's
and
his
win in
previous.
capital."
That's his previous. That's his previous statement. But Mr. Ahluwalia, go ahead with what I asked you.
What I will be very specific is that when our folks are sitting in the war room looking at every district, every county which has voted, and we have a very good understanding on that. We're not that backward in technology, but we have not perfected it to the level we should have. And hence the reason I believe President Trump feels very strong that we are almost there for a win. And that's been the biggest concern which we have had always is the mail-in ballots. And I have kind of cited the example before. There was a successful congressional lady of Korean background who won her election in California. She came for her orientation in Washington, D.C. And after her orientation, when she went back, they found about a few thousand lost mail-in ballots, which came, and she was basically lost her chance to be a congresswoman, which she was duly elected. So it's very disappointing and it's very disheartening when the election integrity is compromised by the Democratic shenanigans. So that's where President Trump is coming from.
Vishnu, may I ask Mr. Ahluwalia a question, please? A couple of questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Dora,
Mr.
please.
Ahluwalia, you said you were in the car when this tweet was announced. Mr. Mitch McConnell is never around when the president tweets. John Cornyn is never around. No Republican seems to be around when the president tweets. You all seem to be in your car, in the toilet, on your way out. And the second question, it used to a lot of mayoral cheating. The president appointed a commission headed by Chris Kobach, who's now running for senator from Kansas. He spent 6 months and taxpayer money trying to find out, and the commission was disbanded. Why was it disbanded? If there's all Democrats are doing all these things, I'd like to understand that.
Well, I am not aware of President Trump's private moving schedule, and I don't think Mitch McConnell has the time to do that. So I think it's a very stupid question on your part.
He has the time to look at a tweet. He's a senator.
Yeah, no,
he should look at a tweet.
Well, he has better things to do, unlike debating on a foolish question with you on the television. So I think that's a ridiculous question, and I
don't think it's ridiculous at all. I think it's relevant. Why don't you just answer the question?
Well, the reason is, why should I answer a question? But why should Mitch McConnell be looking at President Trump's tweet? They're both successful individuals who are leading the country, and they have bigger, important things to do than looking at each other's tweets. That's very childish.
All right. How would you, Mr. Ahluwalia, account for what we are now seeing? Fox is showing Biden widening his lead, 238 to 213. Biden also about 1.8 million ahead in votes. So again, it's a changing process, right?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
So Fox is now showing Biden widening his lead, 238 to 213. Biden also about 1.8 million ahead in terms of votes. Are we seeing a change?
Well, again, as you know very well, that it's very hard to call an election till you have all the votes counted, as I said earlier. Pennsylvania's verdict is still out. Wisconsin, Michigan verdict is still out. Until we don't have those important play states or battleground states verdict, we really can't call the election. And hence the reason, if there are some internal polls or internal numbers, which I have not had a chance to look at, and again, I'm not watching it that closely, because when you know that it's still, there are a lot of mail-in ballots to come in, and I think most likely by Saturday we'll have a very clear picture. And if we have done, or the attorneys who are hired by the campaigns to look at these and scrutinize these votes which have come in, or the ballots which have come in, they feel confident they can call the election, then I'll go with that decision of the of the elected president of our country.
All right.
So
Okay,
far, he's still elected.
All right, fair enough. I need to take a short break. We'll come back to this contest in the US, which is, well, it's quite a contest right now, very close, one way or the other.
I want to stress on one thing, only one thing. Mike Pence, and that's interesting because Mike Pence has said we will remain vigilant as they continue to be counted, the votes. But Donald Trump, just before that, had said we're going to, go to the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, and say, done, the election is over. He's declared victory. He's going to go to the Supreme Court. He has an advantage of conservative voters, judges out there, 6-3. Here are 2 points that we need to consider out there. One is Amy Coney Barrett, the latest Supreme Court Associate Justice, who has just been, who's entered the Supreme Court, whether she will recuse herself or not. That's a big question that people are waiting to see the answer to. But even then, if there are 8 judges, you're going to have a situation where John Roberts will be the swing vote, and it could be, anything. And I don't think Amy Coney Barrett is going to recuse herself out of this situation, because this is really what this election has always been about, getting that conservative advantage of 6-3 when John Roberts has been iffy for the Republicans, who they've not liked him. Even Donald Trump has criticized the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
It's a destruction of the judicial system. It's a destruction of democracy. It is just, but let me hear, without any expletives, Dorab's view of what Trump just said.
You expected that. I mean, he wants to go to court, he will. And I think one thing I would like to say is that the very fact that some of these judges actually would work with him in the 2000 election against, for George W. Bush against Al Gore, does not mean that they will interpret the law in such a manner that makes no sense. I mean, they also have their reputations to protect. So I think, we should, if it has to go to court, let it go to court. I mean, we are not saying there's always going to be 6-3, that no judge is going. This is the interpretation of the law and the Constitution. It was, that time, should the hanging chads be counted, not counted, all those things came up. This time it's not just a simple, straight question. Should the votes be counted or not be counted? And many states have passed laws. More than once they have said that this is for the local legislatures to decide. In states where the local legislatures have decided, I don't see how they can go ahead. Precisely, we got to wait. I mean, he's like a lot of people I know.
I think in a couple of minutes, we should listen to that whole short speech, astonishing, actually, frankly, disgraceful speech by a president of a country. We'll go back to that. But Baj, can we hear from you what your first reaction is to that?
I think I'm worried about the Supreme Court like many other people. It's very unbalanced. Like we've discussed about an hour ago, 3 of the judges here actually fought for Bush in 2000 for the Florida case, and they argued that the Supreme Court could overrule whatever the state's laws were. And Kavanaugh has said something very similar to this recently. So it's quite worrying. If he's going to the Supreme Court, he probably has a very good idea of why he's going there. He's not going to each state. He just decided to go straight to the Supreme Court. He's not arguing this at the state level. So he's asking them to take a federal judgment on this, overriding the constitutions of every state.
I just...
So Harshni, who I greatly respect in her perspective on all these international matters in particular, so Harshni almost has NDTV DNA in her, I feel. But however,
really,
I won't. You may want to disown that remark immediately. But tell me what's happening, so Harshni, in your view.
Well, I think this is eventually going to be the election that everyone predicted about a month ago, rather than in the last few weeks when it seemed as if the polling that came through was not very accurate. And what we did know about a month ago is that the early mail-ins were beginning to come even by then, and people knew that the early mail-ins were going to change the way the election would go. We're used to an American election where almost immediately, as soon as a state's polls close, you have the result. Therefore, we take those early results very, very seriously, whereas in this case, it is clear that you will have to wait for each of those votes to be counted. And I think it's playing out exactly like that, state after state. There are definitely some areas where Trump was expected to do very poorly, where he's done very well. And he has exceeded those expectations. He does have a very clear path to victory. But Biden's path to victory is extremely solid right now as well. So I think one just has to wait out these hours, excruciating as it is, and see how those elections, because eventually, you know, what we're doing is looking at a state and saying, okay, 50% of the vote. But it's still only a third of, 50% of the vote for one candidate, but it's still only 1/3 of the votes that have been counted so far. So I do think that it's necessary to wait because both candidates have a path to victory at present. And of course, you know, we should...
But I just wanted to ask you... Yeah, sorry, Suhasini, exactly right. But isn't this... He wants to stop the vote, stop the counting. Isn't that an undermining of democracy of an extreme form?
Well, clearly what he wants to do is say that I've been winning so far, so let's just stop it right here. But I don't think that that is going to change the course, because you can see from what Mr. Biden said an hour ago or so, that the Democrats are prepared for this moment. And both sides are very clear about one thing: neither is going to accept defeat until the last vote is counted. So if the voting continues and something goes against Mr. Trump, he's also going to probably say, let's continue and have some more counting done. I do agree with you that to make a speech at this point and say, I'm winning this, I'm winning that, when it's completely unclear whether he is actually winning those states, is trying to, prejudice people into thinking that they have already won the election. And obviously, you would hope that a candidate would not do those things. But I think more and more, if you look at an international perspective, the U.S. elections have become as muddied, if you like, as elections around the world, whether it's Central Asia, Central Europe, East Europe, and South Asia as well. So we are looking at a contentious few days ahead. But I don't doubt both sides are prepared for this.
Right. One other aspect of a speech like that and a move like this could be violence on the streets, right? People could just say, this is ridiculous, we voted, let our vote at least be counted. What's this going to the Supreme Court? Could it lead to civil war or, violence at least?
Well, it certainly seems to be calculated for Mr. Trump to tell his supporters, we've already won this election. So if you hear anything to the contrary, this should anger you. So it is clearly pitched at that. That's what he's trying to say, is that we've already won. Mr. Biden said an hour ago, it's not up to me or up to Mr. Trump, it is up to the voter. And therefore, every vote must be counted. But I do think that this is going to be the way it will continue. And maybe by this time tomorrow, we'll have a clearer picture. But I think it's very important that neither side really call it until more and more of the votes that came in earlier. And remember, this is an unusual election by so many perspectives. If you look at the fact that there is a pandemic out there, so it's been very difficult to actually gauge voter sentiment. You're going by smaller voter samples, actually, than before. The second is that this has seen an inordinate number of early voters. That means a month ago, people were sure which way they were going to vote. And the third thing has been that the pollsters have once again, I think, really not been very accurate. This is much more of a divergence, if you ask me, even from 2016, when it not so much to the popular vote, but to the Electoral College.
Yeah, I'll just highlight exactly what you just said. Just look at early voting figures in America. It has been going on, in fact, since 1992. In 1992, if we look at the voting figures, early voters, this is, in previous, just 7%. Then in 2004, it jumped to around about 22%. 2016, the last election, it went up to 37%. And this time, it is 67%. More than 2/3 of the voters voted early. And we just saw that a bulk of them, or a margin of them, were Biden supporters over Trump supporters, the early voters. And they are being counted last. But look at that difference from 37 4 years ago to 67 because of the issues you raised, pandemic and various other factors. So this is not a normal election and needs time for people to count votes, and a country needs to adjust its system for the new circumstances, right? And this is just do not allow voting, counting.
From Indians. Sometimes we take 3 months before we find out how our vote went.
Yeah. We vote and then counting is 3 months later, exactly, or at least 3 weeks later. It doesn't make any difference. We count it, actually. They've got a lot to learn from us. But what are the implications of this? So Ashley, what are the implications of this? I don't know if you could hear.
Implications for us or for the way the vote has gone?
For America right now, for looking ahead in the next 48 hours, one week.
You know, polarized is the way to describe America, and that's with a double L.
Right.
And there seems to be no question that all the misgivings before the election, the fact that people were speaking in bubbles and not understanding that there was a huge voter out there, you know, who was voting for the other side. I think that leans to the idea that America is going to become more fractious and more divided after this election, particularly given Mr. Trump's speech, you know, we're going to the Supreme Court, we've already won kind of thing, than before.
Right,
I think you're going to see a lot more focus, therefore, on their domestic issues. And at a time when they continue to be at the top of the charts when it comes to the coronavirus pandemic, it is a worrying time for the United States.
Yeah, and there's this keep attacking in the foulest way China and diverting attention. If I can bring in Vishnu Prakash, former ambassador, of course. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Your first reaction to that speech, did you hear the speech and what was your reaction?
I heard it. It is highly unusual, and it is something which could become quite provocative. Already there are warnings by FBI that there could be violence. Reports have been that people have been stocking up, buying weapons. I really hope that it doesn't trigger anger and lead to trouble, which is totally unwarranted. And to say things like it's a big fraud on the American people, American public, is quite disturbing.
Extremely disturbing, and from the leader of a country, when everything, I mean, it is an unusual election in an unusual time. 67% of voters voted early. You have to adjust your system a little bit and allow counting. He says you must announce the result on the day of the election, of the counting. He won't allow 2 or 3 days. There's nothing in the law or the Constitution that allows him to make such a statement.
Well, he is a law unto himself. That is something which is very well known. Yeah. But the problem is also systemic. You know, the US does not have an election commission. They do not have uniform laws. Every state frames its own regulations. And to cap it all, in 2013, the Supreme Court allowed the states to make change in the voting procedures without even judicial oversight. Now, look, as you were mentioning, the numbers are very important. The total turnout looks like it will be about 160 million or 16 crores, out of which more than 100 million is early voting. And given the demographics and given how the people vote, it's believed that the Democrats have voted hands down, voted early. So how can 60 million votes decide the outcome of the elections when 102 million votes still need to be counted? I mean, I'm very foxed about it, but I'm quite foxed about so many aspects of what we see.
So, you know, Prannoy, one of the key points that I'm just going to briefly go through what Trump said, and then just bring in one more point. Now, he said, a sad group of people are trying to disenfranchise our people. We were preparing for a huge celebration and that stopped. And he called it a fraud on the American public. And what is dangerous in terms of America as a democracy is his clear statement. We're going to the Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. And that's almost crazy. That's not what elections are all about. But his way of justifying why he believes he's won the election is interesting, because he says we are up by 460,000 votes in Ohio, 317,000 in Florida, Georgia, they can't catch us, Pennsylvania, not even close, we're up by 690,000 votes. Baj, does this make sense? Because given what we know, that the votes of early voters, by and large, have not been counted, is there anything in what Trump says when he says in Georgia, Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, it's not even close, the lead is already big enough, forget about any other votes coming in? Does that make sense? Is there anything in that statement we need to look at?
You know, Wisconsin is now up to 81%. There's a difference of 120,000 votes. It's now getting slightly more difficult for Biden to hold this, but there are lots of votes still to come in from Democratic areas, but I'm not sure. Like Milwaukee is the big one. It's only 41% of the votes have come in there. That means there are another 200,000 votes to come in that area. So the reason, if he actually believed that he had won this thing, I don't think he would be going to the Supreme Court. If he thought that the margins that he was leading by could not be caught up, then he wouldn't be moving the Supreme Court. If you look at the numbers that he has, the New York Times says it's 213. And if you assume that Nevada and Arizona go Democratic, he needs to win 4 out of 5 states that are left, really. And that's where it becomes tough.
One second. If he has to win, which states? Which states do you think he has to win?
Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. He has to win 4 of these.
He has to win 4 of these. And for Biden, presently on the basis of leads, how many more does he need? How many big states does he need to win?
If we give him Nevada and Arizona, he probably just needs 2 of the 5.
Nevada is only 6 electors and Arizona is 11.
11, yeah.
So not the biggest states in terms of Arizona is bigger, but of electors. But it does still, Baj, boil down to Florida, no, with 29 electors. He says, look, we've won Florida by 317,000 votes. We are ahead. He says we are ahead by 317,000.
I'm counting Florida as Republican.
You are counting Florida, yeah. It's still pretty close, though. 46 to, you know, what we have actually suggests that the Democrats are ahead. He says, no, that's not the case at all.
With 4% to get a 2%, to close a 4% gap is a bit tough, I think.
Yeah. So, Hasni, you want to come in over here on which one of these, or which of these swing states will actually have an impact going forward?
Well, I think there is, you know, when you look at Arizona, there is a surprise factor if that was to go blue eventually. And as you pointed out, it's eventually out of those other 5 states, which ones are going to go. I think Pennsylvania, which seems to be the slowest of the block, is really going to be key. And right now, Mr. Trump is far ahead over there. And I think some of the fact that, for example, Minnesota has gone back to the Democrats, but Wisconsin has not, is also telling. So what I'm trying to say over here, Vishnu, is that both sides do have a path to victory. Mr. Biden's may be easier to see right now, but Mr. Trump is clearly in the game. But I do agree with Baj when he says that if you are so confident that you are going to win when all the votes are counted, then why say I'm going to the Supreme Court straight away? And I think many inside the Republican Party are also going to be a bit distressed by that.
In fact, before I take a break, I just wanted to reflect a little bit on what Ambassador Prakash was saying. If we can just have those graphics up on early voters, and the point being that an overwhelming number of American citizens have already cast their vote as early voters. Let's just bring that up, those numbers. Early voters in previous US elections, 1992, look at where it was, and then let's change that to 2016 and look at where it is this year in 2020. 67% are early voters, and the large number of these early voters are believed to be Democratic voters. Now, what Trump wants to do, and this is what we've been discussing, is he wants to stop the vote right now. As Suhasini was mentioning, he says, oh, forget about the other votes. What's happened so far is good enough for us, and so let's stop it. And that's why he wants to go to the Supreme Court. He says, and these were his words, and we really should, in a few minutes, play that speech out again. We're going to the Supreme Court, want all voting to stop, right? So that's the key issue over here. On what basis does he want it? But his legal path in the Supreme Court has been reinforced by developments in the US Supreme Court, which is now loaded up with conservative judges in just the last little while. Will that really have a bearing on where this election goes? It's going to be very close. We'll take a short break, come back with more. Welcome back. It's been quite the morning and the afternoon so far in the United States. No clear indicator of which way the election is going. If you ask Biden, he says that, look, you'll have to wait. We'll see what happens, but we are doing very well. If you ask Trump, he says, look, we won. Be that as it may, a large number of votes haven't been counted, and this is going to be pivotal whichever way the election goes. So let's bring up a set of graphics on the young voter aspect over here. Let's just take a look at these. Remember, 67% of early voters in the United States have their votes need to be counted. Among them, 55% are women, 40% are men. So, and an unknown 5% over here are early voters. The sense is that among early voters, with a large percentage of women, and given early trends, there is a sense that many of them would go the Democrat way. The question is this: will their votes be allowed to be counted? Because what has Trump now done? He says, I'm going to the US Supreme Court and want all voting to stop. Those are his words. Let's bring in a few more graphics. Among younger early voters, the fewer younger voters, over 55 years, 40%. So this obviously has a great deal to do with the COVID situation in the United States. The early voters tend to be older in age, over 55 years of age, as many as 40%, 18 to 44 years are 35%. So those who are older would have already gone out and voted. And depending on the state, their vote may or may not have been counted. In fact, the large number of these early voters, their ballots haven't been counted. The next point, early voters, and this is key, many more for Democrats. 101 million early voters this time around. 45% of them are believed to be Democrats. 31% are believed to be Republicans. No affiliation, 24%. So that's all going to be very important in that final tally. So will this actually count? These are projected numbers from early voters. 45% would be the Democrat vote. Let's go across to Dorab over here. Dorab, those numbers are absolutely staggering. Just that last graphic which we ran, was that a projection that 45% of them, of early voters, would be Democrat, or what is that based on?
No, I think in some states you you can when you register, give your affiliation. There is no estimate. But the question is, the fact that I registered Democrat 10 years ago does not mean I'll vote for a Democrat. That is my affiliation. But let us look at this and look at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania now still has 1.5 million votes still to count. Now, Trump is leading by 670,000 votes as of now. Now, Biden has to win almost 3/4 of those uncounted votes for him to win Pennsylvania. And the votes are predominantly Democratic, but are they Democratic enough to give him 75% of the rest of the votes? Of course, part of that is in Philadelphia, about 25,000 votes, which are predominantly Democratic. But of all the 145,000 that are left, if he can swing 75%, which is a hell of an ask, to swing 75%, then he wins Pennsylvania. But these are just party affiliations would have been given. That's why you have none, because some people will say no affiliation. Some are independents. So, and it's not compulsory to give a party affiliation in all states. So we must not look at this. It gives you an indication, certainly a trend, but not an actual number.
So, Dorab, just for a moment, assuming once this is all counted, assuming Trump and the US Supreme Court allows that to take place, and if Pennsylvania goes the Republican way, right, and Dorab just mentioned that 670,000 votes is the lead for the Republicans. Trump in his speech, if I recall correctly, said 690,000, a little bit more than that. So if they lose,
since he spoke.
Did he say 670 or 690? I heard 690.
No, whatever he said, I'm saying it could change.
Right.
Counting is taking place.
Right. So Baj, my question is this. If the Democrats lose Pennsylvania, then what from their perspective?
They have to win Michigan and Wisconsin and hold Arizona and Nevada.
Okay.
I mean, I'm assuming that they will then Republicans also win North Carolina and Georgia,
Right. Because that's what he also said. So Amitoj, you wanted to come in over here. When Trump says Georgia, they can't catch us, Pennsylvania, not even close, Ohio, we are up by 460,000, Florida, we are up by 317,000. He seems to be basing his rhetoric on numbers. Now, whether these numbers are accurate or not, given Trump's record of bluster, we don't know. But assuming that these numbers are correct, is there any basis for his belief that, look, it'll be difficult for the Democrats to catch up?
Look, Vishnu, there are a few points that I want to make. So we've been talking for a while. Dr. Roy used the word civil war, and I'm going to use that to pick up what Suhasini had earlier said when she said the Democrats are prepared to go ahead and fight this battle in the courts. Yes, in 2000 they were not prepared. Al Gore, in fact, called up George Bush first and conceded, then called him back and said, I'm sorry, I'm not ready to concede. Then he didn't want to destroy American democracy, so he didn't really fight it like the Republicans did. But this time, Biden and team are ready to fight. So you're going to have a fight. But this is a colossal devastation of democracy in America. This is a dog whistle that he's just cited to his supporters, particularly the fringe right-wing supporters. And I want to go back to what Donald Trump had said in one of the debates when he was asked to condemn white supremacy, and he was asked to condemn specifically the Proud Boys, which is a right-wing group. And he said, stand down, and then he said, stand by. All right. He also said in Michigan, a key state we're looking at right now, 16 electoral votes, very decisive. He went out there days after the Michigan governor, Governor Whitmer, had a kidnapping plot against her, where men who were trying with guns had gone to her governor house and made plans to actually kidnap her. He went out there and chanted with the crowd, lock her up. I want to go now and tell Dora, because he'll be interested in this, that Benjamin Ginsburg, the Republican lawyer that he was talking about, decades-long lawyer of the Republican Party, has said that he's never seen anything like this. This is historic, this is unprecedented, this is uncharted territory. And the CBS has just said that NYPD is preparing for a potential unrest in New York, and I'm in New York. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. 40 demonstrators on the West Coast in LA have also been arrested. I can tell you that this is really shocking. And just to add about Pennsylvania, I mean, this is democratic blasphemy for me, because I don't understand this. Donald Trump says he wants it to be counted in Arizona. He says, stay in play Arizona, but he doesn't want to count Pennsylvania, and he doesn't want to count Wisconsin and Michigan and the other states because he's leading there. And also, interestingly, in Philadelphia, what was not mentioned, he covered almost everything, Dorab, but 270,000 mail-in ballots are still left to be counted. Yes, the prospect of Biden winning 70% of those 1.4 million votes that are still left to be counted are very, I mean, that's going to be a task. But it comes down to those three states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. But this is the ring. In a boxing ring, you have a ring for round 2. This is round 2. And it's going to go to the courts, and I can't say what's going to happen, but Donald Trump has made it very clear, and we should believe him because we have not believed him. We have not believed him for weeks when he's been saying he's going to do this, and he has done it.
All right. Suhasini, last comment from you. Even if the Supreme Court is loaded with conservative judges, would there not be the basis of law if Trump says, look, all the voting has to stop now because it suits me, and people have cast their vote? There have been other courts which have said that, look, you have to count the other votes for, 6 odd days. So then how does it work in the court? Just because of political affiliation of the judges? Or...
No, absolutely not. And I think that the truth is that Mr. Trump can say, stop the counting right now, but the burden of evidence will be very high on him to show that you can actually, say that any of the votes after this point should not be counted. I think what we're seeing is tactics. What we're seeing is rhetoric. What we're seeing is an extension, if you like, of campaign time. But the election has happened. The votes have been now cast. So it is going to be, we are going to have to get through the next 48 hours, the next 24 hours, and every vote will be counted, whether it's Pennsylvania or anywhere else. I think it is actually coming down to Pennsylvania simply because so many of the other states are already now, giving in their votes. I'm seeing Virginia now being called, and Arizona could be very shortly as well. The thing about Pennsylvania was, of course, the fact that they were not allowed to open their ballots. They were not even allowed to assemble their ballots before before counting began for everyone. So they are a little behind everybody else. But I mean, the truth is that this is still an early election. I know it's hard to say, given that we're already seeing so many things lit up, but this is an early election, and the path to victory for both is still open.
We'll take a short break. Suhasini, thanks very much for being with us. Up next, we'll listen in on what Donald Trump had to say a few minutes back.